Daniel Carter had always been a man of structure. As a financial analyst, he thrived in a world of numbers and logical decisions. But no formula or calculation could have prepared him for what he discovered on an otherwise ordinary Thursday evening. Returning home later than usual, Daniel expected to find his wife, Emily, unwinding with a glass of wine or scrolling through her phone. Instead, silence greeted him. As he walked past the bathroom, a small white object in the trash caught his eye. A pregnancy test. Positive. Daniel's pulse quickened. His mind scrambled for an explanation. But there was one glaring problem. 2 years ago, he had been in a severe accident. The crash had left him hospitalized for weeks, and doctors had to perform an emergency orchiectomy, removing one of his testicles due to severe damage. The other had been rendered non-functional. He had come to terms with the fact that he would never father children. A wave of nausea hit him. The woman he had cherished, the person he had built a life with, had deceived him. But Daniel wasn't the type to confront without evidence. He needed proof. The next morning, he maintained his usual routine, kissed Emily on the forehead, and left for work, except he didn't go to work. Instead, he parked down the street and watched. As expected, Emily left for her workout session. The moment she was gone, Daniel went back inside. On her laptop, a folder named Projects caught his attention. Inside, he found a series of messages exchanged with someone named Alex, her personal trainer. The texts left no room for doubt. Passionate, illicit conversations spanning nearly a year. And then, the final betrayal. Of course, I'll tell him it's his. Alex isn't ready for a baby, and Daniel has always wanted one. He'll believe me. Daniel's hands trembled. The trust he had once placed in Emily shattered into 1,000 pieces. The rage boiled inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. If Emily thought she could manipulate him, she was about to learn otherwise. Daniel didn't confront Emily that night. Instead, he methodically tore down the foundation of their shared life. He transferred all their joint savings into a personal account, locked her out of their financial assets, and cut off access to anything she relied on. Then, he made a call to Alex's fiancée, Rachel. "Miss Hartman, I think you'll want to see this." He emailed her the screenshots, along with a photo of the pregnancy test. Rachel's response was immediate. A call, her voice shaking. "That lying scumbag. He told me he was committed." A deep breath. "Daniel, what are you going to do?" Daniel smirked. "Make them regret everything." The next morning, Emily awoke to find Daniel gone. His closet was empty, his belongings missing. She reached for her phone, her bank account balance was 0. Her cards declined. A message from Daniel flashed across her screen. "I know everything. And so does Rachel. Good luck." Panic set in. She called him, voicemail. She texted Alex, no reply. Then, another message came through, from Rachel. "You thought you could fool everyone? Think again." Tears streamed down Emily's face. The illusion she had so carefully crafted was unraveling faster than she could contain it. Meanwhile, in a sleek apartment across town, Daniel sipped his coffee, watching the chaos unfold through his phone. He had played the devoted husband for years. Never again. This was just the beginning. Days passed, and Emily's world continued to crumble around her. Every corner she turned, every interaction she had seemed to spiral further out of control. She had tried to explain to her friends, her family, anyone who would listen, but there was no hiding the truth. Daniel's departure was just the beginning, and now the consequences of her actions were inescapable. In a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, Emily sought out Alex. She needed to fix this, to make everything right, she couldn't lose everything. But when she arrived at his apartment, she found an empty place, the doors locked, and a note on the doorstep. It was from Rachel. Don't bother looking for him. He's gone. You're on your own now. Emily's heart sank. She thought she had it all figured out, thought she could manipulate everyone, Alex, Daniel, even Rachel, but it had all fallen apart in ways she never expected. As she stood there, staring at the note in disbelief, she heard a car pulling up. She turned, her breath catching when she saw Daniel's sleek black sedan coming to a stop in front of the building. The door opened, and Daniel stepped out, his expression unreadable, a calmness about him that was almost unnerving. "Daniel, please," Emily pleaded as she rushed toward him. "We need to talk. I never wanted it to end like this." Daniel's gaze was icy, his eyes no longer holding any of the warmth they once had. "No, Emily. You don't get to play the victim here. You've made your choices, and now you'll live with them." "I made a mistake," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Please, Daniel, I'm sorry. I was scared, everything just spiraled out of control." Daniel didn't flinch. "You're sorry. You're sorry for getting caught. I didn't mean for it to hurt you like this," she continued, her voice breaking. "I thought." "You thought I'd be the fool," he interrupted coldly. "Well, I'm not. I don't even know who you are anymore." Daniel took a step back, as if distancing himself physically and emotionally from her. "You used me. You thought you could control me, but I'm done. I've had enough." The finality in his tone was like a punch to her gut. Emily opened her mouth to say something, anything, but the words failed her. The gravity of the situation settled in, she had lost him for good. Without another word, Daniel turned and walked away, his footsteps steady and unhurried. He didn't look back. The weeks that followed were a blur for Emily. She tried reaching out to Daniel, to apologize, but he was gone, completely, utterly gone from her life. The house they had built together felt hollow. Every room, every corner seemed to echo with the emptiness she had created. Rachel had moved on as well. She and Alex had left town, cutting ties with everyone who had once been part of their lives. Daniel's life, however, was on a different trajectory. His meticulous planning had paid off, and now he was living in a new city, under a new name, with a fresh start, far from the web of betrayal he had once been caught in. Daniel's departure left Emily with nothing but the shattered remnants of her deceit. She couldn't escape the consequences. In her pursuit of control, she had lost everything that truly mattered. And Daniel? He was free. Months had passed since Daniel's disappearance from Emily's life. The once solid world that had crumbled beneath the weight of betrayal had now become something new, something unfamiliar. Emily had attempted to rebuild, though each day felt like a battle against her own regrets. She had lost more than just Daniel, she had lost her sense of self, her foundation, and perhaps even her chance at redemption. But just as the wreckage of her past began to settle, Emily found herself at a crossroads. A new opportunity had emerged, an offer to work overseas, to leave everything behind and start fresh. It wasn't so much a decision as it was an escape. She told herself she was ready, that this would be her chance to prove to herself that she could. As she boarded the plane to a new city, her mind kept returning to one thought. Could she ever truly redeem herself? Could she ever fix the damage she had caused? Or was she doomed to forever be haunted by her choices? Meanwhile, in the new city Daniel had built his life in, things were not as perfect as they seemed. His new identity, his escape, had come at a price. Though he had distanced himself from the pain of his past, the scars remained, hidden beneath a carefully constructed facade. He had found work as a financial consultant, using his expertise in a different way, and had even formed new relationships, casual and fleeting. Yet there was a constant ache, a gnawing emptiness, that refused to go away. Late one evening, as Daniel sat in his small apartment, scrolling through the news, a headline caught his eye: local businesswoman to head global expansion, Emily Carter takes charge. His heart skipped a beat. He didn't want to care. He had left everything behind for a reason. Yet the name, her name, had a strange weight to it. His mind flashed back to the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation. He had been a fool to trust her. But what hurt most wasn't the fact that she had deceived him, it was the realization that he still hadn't fully let go. She had moved on, and he had watched as she carved a new path for herself, one that didn't include him. Back in the city where Daniel had once lived, Emily was quickly ascending in the corporate world. Her new position had thrust her into the limelight, and while she wore her success like armor, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had built an empire from the ashes of her mistakes, but the satisfaction of it felt hollow. She had buried the past, had put on a mask of determination, but there were nights when her thoughts drifted back to Daniel. How was he? Was he happy? Had he truly moved on, or was he carrying the weight of their shared history just as she was? It was a rainy afternoon when their paths crossed again. Emily had returned to the city on business and had just finished a meeting. As she walked out of the building, she saw him. Daniel. He was standing across the street, looking at her, though his expression remained unreadable. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to slow, the city noise fading into the background as they locked eyes, two people who had once been everything to each other, now strangers. She didn't know what to say, or if she should even say anything. She had spent so long convincing herself that she was over him, that she was stronger than her mistakes, but in that instant, all those walls crumbled. Finally, Daniel took a step toward her. His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable edge to it. I didn't think I'd see you again. Emily swallowed, unsure of the emotion that was welling up inside her. I didn't think I'd see you either. Daniel studied her for a long moment, as if measuring her, trying to determine whether the woman in front of him was the same person who had once betrayed him, or if she had truly changed. I see you've done well for yourself, he said, his tone guarded. But I wonder, he paused. What does it mean to you? Is it worth it? Emily hesitated. I don't know. I thought it would make everything better. But it hasn't. I thought success would fill the emptiness, but it just reminds me of everything I've lost. Daniel took a deep breath, his gaze flickering for a brief moment. I've been trying to move on, too. But it's not as easy as I thought. For a moment, silence hung between them, both of them searching for the right words, but neither knowing how to reach the other. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice softer now. I've been angry at you for a long time. But I've learned something, holding on to that anger, it doesn't change anything. It only drags you down. Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. For everything. Daniel nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I know. And for the first time in years, Emily felt something shift. Maybe it was the start of healing. Maybe it was the first step toward understanding. Maybe it was just the beginning of a new chapter. But whatever it was, it felt different. The past could never be undone, but perhaps they could learn to live with it. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Weeks passed after their unexpected meeting, and Emily and Daniel found themselves circling each other from afar, each reluctant to take the next step. Emily had tried to focus on her work, diving deep into the responsibilities of her new role, but it was impossible to ignore the emptiness that lingered. Even in her success, she couldn't shake the weight of. Meanwhile, Daniel had begun to open up more to the idea of healing. He kept his distance from Emily but found himself reflecting on what they had shared, the love, the trust, and the painful end. He knew that forgiveness wasn't something that could happen overnight, but perhaps, in time, it. One evening, as the autumn wind swept through the city streets, Daniel found himself standing outside a small cafe. He hesitated before walking in, knowing that Emily was inside. They had agreed to meet, though neither of them had fully understood why. Was it closure? Or was it the first step to? Emily sat at a corner table, her eyes meeting his as he entered. There was no anger between them now, no resentment. Just the quiet understanding that they had both been through something profound. "Hey," she greeted him softly, her voice laced. "Hey," Daniel replied, taking a seat across from her. The atmosphere felt different from their last meeting, less tense, more open. They were no longer trapped in the web of betrayal, but it was unclear if there was a path forward. There was a long pause as both of them searched for the right words. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice steady. "I've been thinking about everything, Daniel. About the past, about what we could have been. And I realize now. I've spent so much time blaming myself that I forgot to look at what I really want. What I need." Daniel nodded, his gaze softening. "I spent a long time carrying that anger. And it felt like a weight I couldn't escape. But I can't hold on to that forever. I have to let it go." For a moment, their eyes locked, no longer filled with bitterness, but with the quiet understanding that came from shared pain and time. Neither of them was the person they had once been, but neither of them could completely erase the other from their lives. "Do you think we could ever be friends?" Emily asked, her voice tentative but hopeful. Daniel took a deep breath. He had asked himself that question countless times since their last encounter. Could they? Could they really go back to being something close to the people they once were, despite everything that had happened? He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time in years, no longer the woman who had betrayed him, but a woman who had suffered, who had changed. "I don't know," Daniel replied honestly. "But I think we're both trying to figure that out. And maybe that's enough." A slow smile crept across Emily's face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no shame in her expression, no remorse hanging over her every move. There was only a fragile hope, a hope that, despite everything, they could still build something new. Months later, Emily stood by the window of her high-rise apartment, looking out over the sprawling city below. The world had changed in ways she hadn't expected. She had found success, but she had also found herself again, more whole, more aware of her choices. Daniel had remained a quiet presence in her life. They kept in touch, casually at first, then more frequently. Slowly, cautiously, they began to rebuild a connection, not as lovers, but as two people who had been deeply entwined and had come out of the wreckage of their past stronger. They had both changed, grown, and learned from their mistakes. And in that growth, there was something unexpected. Not love, not yet, but respect. The kind of respect that only comes when two people have faced the hardest parts of themselves and each other and found a way to move forward. Emily didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to face it. The web of betrayal that had once consumed her life had unraveled, leaving behind the threads of possibility, of second chances, of redemption. And as Daniel sat on the other side of town, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, he, too, knew that he had found peace. The pain no longer defined him. It was a part of his past, but it didn't control him. Together or apart, they had both learned that redemption wasn't about erasing mistakes, it was about accepting them and moving forward. And that was enough. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear what you think. Your feedback really helps me create better content for you. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. Thanks again and see you in the next video. Take care.